Welcome. Thanks for joining us today on our webinar that is about monitoring student progress, specifically keeping students challenged. My name's Claire Hayes, and I am excited to talk with you about this topic. It is one of my favorite topics to cover. Monitoring student performance actually has two separate phases that we group. The first one is the one on the lower left side of my slide that's called checking initial placement. You can see it's a little grayed out on the slide I'm displaying right now. That is a webinar, or that is a topic that was covered in a webinar I did a couple weeks ago. The link to that webinar is in your chat box right now. And that webinar can be watched if you are in the phase of monitoring performance where students have only passed 1, 2, or 3 stories. So if your students are fairly new to the program and they've just had a couple stories that they've passed, the ideal place to start monitoring performance is in the phase we call checking initial placement. And again, that webinar is on our website, and it's about a 30-minute webinar that covers that specific topic. Today, what we're going to cover is the second phase, which is called keeping students challenged. So if your students have passed 6 or more stories, you are in that second phase of keeping students challenged. And basically, that is what it sounds like. It is the process that for the rest of the time you utilized Read Naturally Live, you will be looking at student data to make sure that they are as challenged as possible. We all know that our primary objective is to maximize achievement, right? That's what our objective is for all of our students, and especially for our struggling students, because simply making progress isn't going to cut it when you're behind. Everyone is making progress. So our kids need to make more progress, which means that we want them in a level that challenges them as much as possible. We don't want them to get frustrated, because if they get to frustration, we could lose them, right? But we need them to be working in as high a level as possible that will challenge them, to get them exposure to content and vocabulary and concepts that are as hard as they can handle, but still be successful. As far as their story goal is concerned, we want them to be able to reach it, right? But they need to have to work hard to get there. We all have had a goal in our lives that was challenging to reach, and we know the satisfaction that comes with reaching a goal that was difficult. If your goal is something that you could do 3 weeks ago, you're not going to feel very good about it when you meet it next week, right? If it's too easy, the amount of pride you get is not as significant. So not only is there the need for our students to be exposed to high level content and to work as hard as possible, but the satisfaction that comes with achieving goals that are challenging is a lot greater, which will in turn get the buy-in from our students that we so desperately need them to have. So in order for this process to work well and for you to know how to handle your students, you're going to be looking at a specific report that is available within Read Naturally Live. And the report that's available within Read Naturally Live is called the Students at a Glance Report. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on this report just a little bit so that you can see what's in here. If you take a look at the sections that are kind of, I don't know, a third of the way over on the right side. The first section is called Series and Level. It just provides you with information about the series they're working in, the level they're working in, and how many stories they've passed. Then this gray section provides you with fluency information, and this white section over here talks about comprehension. If you notice, each column has a header that goes vertically. So go ahead and read that heading. The first column in the fluency section is called cold timing. Then the next one is goal, hot timing, and so forth. Underneath each heading, there are some parentheses with information in there. So in the parentheses under cold timing, it says first 3 / last 3. So what it's telling you is that the first number in the cold timing column is the average cold timing score based on the first 3 cold timing scores. So the computer takes the first, second, and third, it gets the average of those 3 numbers and it plunks it right in that spot in the box. The number after the forward slash is the average after the most recent 3 cold timing scores. So that is going to be, considering that this student has passed 12 stories, the first number, 41, is the average after story 1, 2, and 3. And number 48, that number is story number 10, 11, and 12, right? So we're pulling data from different stories past. And so you can see at a very quick glance, we can take a look at whether or not they're making progress in these important areas in the report. I am just going to pop over into the program for a moment, just so I can show you where to go to run this report. If you are not familiar with how to find that report, when you log in, if you click on the picture of the house in the upper left-hand corner and scroll down to the bottom, you will find a tile that is marked reports. That reports option is also available in the drop-down menu from the upper left-hand corner. The final item on that menu is called Reports, and you can select that. Notice there's 6 different boxes. The first 2, the roster and the password reports, those are just administrative reports providing information about your class, not on how their performance is, but rather who they are, how they log in, that sort of thing. The next report is called Read Naturally Live Reports. And if I click on that button, I'm presented with 5 different options. Okay, lots of wonderful reports that you can explore and look at in here. The one that you utilize for making these decisions is called the Students at a Glance report. It's the very first one. If you click on that, you will see you have a list of all of your students. You can sort and filter them based on last name, first name, grade, school. So if you want to get your list to be shorter than what's presented, you can do that by using the filter option that is the 3 horizontal lines right next to each header name, okay? So you can select one student, or if you want to select a group of students, you hold your shift key down when you select the final student in your list, and that will highlight everybody. Okay, so you can select 1, 2, 10, all, however you want to do it. And then you will click the button that says Generate Report for Selected. The date range autofills to the August 1st of this school year, but if you want to adjust those dates, you simply click in the calendar to make adjustments to those dates, and then you select Generate Reports. It will provide the information for the students that you've asked to have the report on. It provides information about all the levels that they're working on, current one that they're working on, as well as ones that they've completed in the past. Okay. All right, so now let's pop back into that PowerPoint, and we're going to talk about, once you run that report, what you want to do is look for whether or not you see progress, right? We want to make things more challenging for students if they're making progress in 2 or more of the following areas. So, do you see improvement in cold timing, hot timing, quiz? Is the difference between their hot timing score and their story goal 10 or more? Is there a double-digit difference between their goal and their final pass timing score? Are the average number of practices going down? Okay, students are on the practice step until they meet their story goal. So if a student is practicing 6 times, it means that they likely didn't meet their story goal until their 6th practice. So if the number of practices is going down, they are able to meet that story goal more rapidly. They don't need to practice as many times in order to reach it. Okay, so that's another indication of success and progress. And then finally, student behavior changing. Kids are more engaged when they're challenged. And so if you had a student who was really into the program and really liked it and engaged, if maybe a month ago, and now they're not quite as into it, it's very likely that what they need is more of a challenge, and that can re-engage and remotivate the student. So taking a look at not something that's necessarily in the report, but that is in your head, and I often think about it as just teacher instinct, right? It's in your gut. You're saying something's not right. We have to make a change for this student so that we can see that excitement about utilizing the program again. So Average cold timing score improving. You're going to get hard numbers in that students at a glance report. It's going to say very specific numbers in there. But if you just look at their fluency reports, you can sometimes see just by looking at this, you don't need this specific number. Take a look at story 1, 2, and 3 with this cold scores. They're somewhere between 50 and 60, right? On the first 3. Now, the most recent 3, they're all between 60 and 70. So we're seeing progress right there. Same with hot timing. At first, they were just a little bit under 90, and now they're getting at or close to 100. So there may be extreme increases and some sudden decreases because struggling readers are really inconsistent, right? So it's not one data point that we look at compared to one data point. That's why the averages are so important, so it can kind of smooth out those extreme highs and lows for us. You can also take a look at whether the average cold timing score and the goal, the difference between those two numbers. Here is the story goal listed on this report. We can see how close the student was to the story goal at the beginning, but now on their past timings, they're quite a bit above it. The quiz is another report. Although the students at a glance report will provide you with hard percentage numbers on that, just taking a quick glance at this report, I can see on story 1, 2, and 3, out of these, let's see, there's 18 questions, they missed 4. Now, out of the most recent 18 questions, this student only missed 1. So clearly progress in that comprehension area there. And then practices, they started at 6 and now they're down at 4. So these are those indications for a change. When we make a change, we tend to only increase one thing at a time. So if we decide to raise a level, we leave the goal the same. If we raise a goal, we leave the level the same. Now, anytime I list a rule, I can almost guarantee you there's going to be an exception to it. So there certainly may be times where you decide to make a different decision. But the vast majority of the time, raising one element at a time is ideal. After a student has passed 12 stories, they have 12 more stories. So we are a little more likely to raise a goal. And after they've passed 24 stories, there are no more stories in that level. So then we have to raise the level. But I will say that there's nothing magical about 12 or 24. So don't hesitate to make changes before 12, after 12. Maybe the student's ready for a change at 8 stories, or maybe they're ready for a change at 13 stories. I will tell you that most often, students do not need all 24 stories in a level. So don't feel an obligation to pass a certain number of stories. The data is what will drive that rather than the number of stories passed necessarily. But the one thing we always keep in mind when we have our struggling readers is what is their long-term fluency benchmark goal, right? Where do we ultimately want them from a rate and level standpoint? So in order for us to talk about that effectively, we have to have a definition that is common between us. Okay, so let's just restate that. I suspect you probably already know it, but I'm just going to restate it to make sure we're all on the same page. Each student's long-term benchmark goal is that the student can read unpracticed grade level passages at, near, or above the 50th percentile on national norms. So unpracticed grade level, that means I want a third grader to read a third grade passage. The first time that third grader reads a third grade passage, I want it to be around the 50th percentile, right? So unpracticed grade level passage close to that 50th percentile mark. In the fall, those norms are likely to be at least one of the reasons that they ended up in your intervention group, right? Most districts do fall, winter, and spring benchmark assessment tests, and the scores in the fall help to determine which kids were going to be in which groups, right? Which kids needed an intervention. Where we want them eventually is in the spring norms. We want each of our students to be able to read their grade level passage around the 50th percentile by the end of this school year. It is possible for some of our kids. Your kids who are 1 or 2 years below grade level, that is a reasonable goal for them, right? If you have a student, though, who's an 8th grader who's reading at a 2nd grade level, maybe not possible to get them through 6 grades in 9 months' time, right? But that doesn't mean that's not still their ultimate goal. That's where we want them ultimately, is grade level. So it is something that we still want to compare to. And you'll see what I mean as we go through these examples, and how we make decisions based on the differences in whether or not they're reading real close to grade level or if they're reading far away from grade level. So the samples I'm going to be talking with you about now are going to give you some insight into that point. Here we have our student Lee. We're going to take a look at Lee's cold timing improvement, hot timing improvement. We're going to look at the differences between his goal and his hot timing. We'll take a look and see if his quiz has improved and how he's doing with his practices. I don't have to go to different places to pull this information, right? All I have to do is run that students at a glance report. And all of these things, all of these points of improvement are going to be listed in black and white or black and gray for me here on this report. Okay, so Lee is a 3rd grader. You can see his little picture down in the left-hand corner. He's a 3rd grader. He's working in the sequence series, level 2.5, and so far he's passed 12 stories. Okay, the first question is, has Lee's average cold timing score improved? You can clearly see where this red circle is now. That's where his cold timing score started at 41. We're at 48. So, yep, first thing, he has improved on fluency. He has also improved on his past timing. His hot timing score started at 74. Now he's at 80. So we've got 2 areas he's made progress already. The difference between his hot timing score and his goal is 10. His current goal is the second number in this goal column, which is 70. His current hot timing is the second number in the hot timing score, so that's 80. The difference there is 10, so it's double-digit difference. His quiz started at 87, it's now at 93, and his practices have gone down. So this is the easy question. Does he need more of a challenge? Absolutely. Our requirement is 2 areas of growth, and we are seeing areas of growth in every area. Okay, so there's no doubt that Lee is ready for more of a challenge. So really the question becomes, the more challenging questions are what do we do? We know he's ready for more of a challenge, but do we raise his level or do we raise his goal? Okay, so one thing to look at is how many stories has he passed? If he's passed 24, well, your decision's made. He has to go to the next level. If he's only halfway through a level, you have more options there. You can raise either one. The other thing you're looking at is what is his long-term benchmark goal? And based on what that goal is, which is he closer to? Remember, this goal is twofold, right? It's unpracticed and grade level material. Okay. So is his rate close to the rate that his peers are reading at? Or is he closer in the level that he's reading at? If you have a 3rd grader who's reading at a mid-2nd grade level, that student is pretty close to grade level. It's actually a luxury, right? Because you've got a bigger problem when that student is a 7th grader reading at a mid-2nd grade level. Now you're a lot more concerned about level and about content and about vocabulary. So in that case, you may be more inclined to raise that level sooner. But when students are closer to grade level, it allows you the opportunity to hone in on that automaticity and to build that fluency and accuracy and expression and really hone in on getting students to become automatic with the words at that reading level. All right, so let's take a look at these 3 components, asking ourselves where Lee is, what his long-term goal is, and which is he closer to? Is he closer to rate or is he closer to level? So Lee has only passed 12 stories. So we can raise his goal or his level. His long-term fluency benchmark goal, go ahead and try to find this on my slide. Just pause for a moment so you can look. There's another table on my screen that tells you what the oral reading fluency 50th percentile is for third grade. So his long-term goal is we want Lee to be able to read at 112 words correct per minute, unpracticed, at 112 words correct per minute. Okay. Which is he closer to? Well, he's currently reading 48 words correct per minute in unpracticed. His current cold timing is 48 on unpracticed material. We want him at 112. He has to more than double the pace in which he's able to read. He is a third grader who is working in level 2.5. So he's really quite close to grade level. Now, doesn't mean he's necessarily close to grade level independently, but in this program, he is being exposed to content that's pretty close to his grade level, right? He's only a half a grade level below his peers. So what would you do if Lee was your student? Would you raise his goal and hone in on that accuracy and expression and pace and get him to become more automatic, to get him to work on that huge difference he has between the pace of his peers and his pace? Or would you put him in a harder level and get him more challenging words? We would recommend that you raise Lee's goal. You're lucky that Lee is only working in a level that's only a half a grade level below his peers. And that positive information tells you that you have the luxury of working on great. You don't have to be that worried about content, sophistication of vocabulary, and the difficulty of the concepts. He's using material that's pretty close to what his peers are getting. And so because of that, I can have my focus really be on that pace. So I would raise Lee's goal in this situation. We raise a goal by 10 words at a time. We raise a level by half a year. Now, again, every time I make a rule, I state something like that. I guarantee you there are times where teachers decide to raise by more or less than 10, and when they decide to raise by a whole year, but it is rare. Okay, so general guidelines, 10 words for a goal, half a grade level for a year. You always discuss the change with the student, and it's for two primary reasons. The first primary reason is that it's a fun conversation for you, for the student, for the parents to hear about when the student gets home that night. Everybody loves this conversation. And in education, we have to have conversations that we would prefer not to have, that the students would prefer not to have. And so when you have the opportunity to have a positive conversation that everyone enjoys, we're going to take advantage of that. So that's the obvious reason. The other reason is incredibly important as well, though, and that is that students need to understand on a level in which they experience the fact that the student is responsible for his progress. It is not your job to read for him. In fact, you can't read for him. At the end of the day, there's nothing you can really do for your student unless he does for himself, right? Students need to know that they are responsible for their reading growth. Teachers can't do it for them. We can find the right program. We can spend hours on the weekend researching different options for struggling readers and find the right program. We can spend $100 on prizes and create an elaborate incentive program and have the room be perfect environment for learning, and all those things we can do. But he has to read. It doesn't matter what we do if he doesn't read. And the students need to understand the time they spend on task is up to them. And the more time they read, the more progress they make. And so discussing the change with the student, allowing them to be part of the decision, helps them experience the fact that they're responsible for their growth. Okay, so this is just an opportunity for the student to experience their ability to help make these decisions for themselves. All right, so Lee's goal was 70 it's now 80. Okay, you're going to raise it to 80 in the program. Now, we have something within the program that we call Data Mentor. And Data Mentor is an algorithm within the program that monitors students' performance based on the data from the program. And it provides suggestions to the teacher to help the teacher improve implementation and to maximize performance. Please notice the word that we use is suggestion. It is not a mandate. It is not a dictate. It's not a requirement. It is a suggestion because it is just an algorithm. It's not a teacher. So you need to decide whether or not you agree with that suggestion. But Data Mentor suggestions can be found on the past review work page. So get your bearings with me here for a minute. Take your eyes and put them on this screenshot I have here on my slide. Notice that the taskbar at the top here starts with keywords, prediction, cold timing, so forth. The student has gone through all of the steps. They're at the final pass timing. The student has read the story for you. You've corrected her open-ended questions, right? So you're at this review work page. The final tab on the right-hand side is called Data Mentor. And if there is a red dot on the Data Mentor tab, like you see on my slide, it means that there is a suggestion for this student based on their data. If you agree with the suggestion, you will click the Accept button. By clicking the Accept button, it will automatically bring the student to the change that was suggested. So you click this Accept button. When the student goes into the program to do their next story, it will keep them in this level. Notice the student Lee passed the first 12 stories. Now he's in the second set of stories. He's still in level 2.5, but now his story goal is 80. I didn't have to go in and adjust anything. I didn't have to make any manual changes. I simply clicked Accept. Okay. Now, you can make changes even if there isn't a suggestion. So you can go in and make adjustments whenever you want. But based on the Data Mentor, simply clicking that Accept button will bring that student to the different adjustments for level and goal. Okay, so now our question becomes, what do we do with Lee? Is he ready to exit? He's made a lot of progress. He started in the fall with only reading 36 words correct per minute. That was probably down below the 10th percentile, maybe, or around that point. So he ended up in our intervention group. At spring, he's made tons of progress. He's reading 85 words correct per minute. Right? So he's made a lot of progress there. He's currently working in 3.5 of Read Naturally Live, and his average cold timing score right now is 80. His ultimate goal is 112. Is he ready to be done? The spring benchmark data is our most valuable data. That is what we look at first. But it only comes 3 times a year. And our curriculum-based measurement data comes all the time, right? We get that every day we're working in the program. So sometimes I like to peek in between those assessments and take a look at where they're at. But it's not as good of data. So just know that if you're doing the peeking using the curriculum-based measurement data, no, it's not formal assessment data, okay? But if your student is like Lee and he's a 3rd grader working in 3.5, that cold timing score data, if you're with them, if it's accurate, that cold timing score data is valuable. And you can see that this student's cold timing score and their spring assessment data is pretty close to each other, okay? His average hot timing score is 114, but we need his cold timing score to be 112. He's only at 85 for his formal data, 80 for his CBM data, so he is not ready to exit, okay? He's made a lot of progress, but he's not quite done. Now, Lee was a great example because he made a ton of progress. Sometimes that doesn't happen. So if you look at your student's data or you just intuitively know the student isn't making progress, the first thing I want you to ask yourself and to ask your student is, are the steps being implemented with fidelity? The most common step that is done poorly is The read along step. It's not a listening activity. It's a read along out loud with your mouth, not in your head, because we have no idea what they're doing in their heads. They have to read along with their mouths. So the first thing to look at if you're seeing performance issues is the student reading along properly out loud with their mouths during the read along? Are they clicking on words they don't know during the practice step? The act of clicking on a word that they don't know, then they will hear the word and see the word and say the word. That is very powerful. So encourage them to click on any word they're unsure of during their practice step. Okay, so make sure those steps are being done correctly. The next thing you might consider is a program adjustment. And by that, I mean adjusting the story options. So if you have a student who is an 8th grader reading at a 2nd grade level, you might decide, I don't want the student to be typing retells and prediction. I don't want them to spend time keyboarding and writing. He's too far below grade level. So I'm going to turn off those steps so that'll give him more time in the act of reading. Okay, you might decide to turn off certain steps in order to maximize so they have more time reading. You might decide that the student doesn't need all 3 read-alongs. 1 or 2 is sufficient, so you drop him down, right? So every step is adjustable within Read Naturally Live, and those adjustments can be made at any time. Your students make progress throughout the year, so it's very likely that their steps should be adjusted throughout the year as well. Another thing to think about is classroom management. And I think of that in kind of 2 primary categories. One, of course, is the one that none of us like. It's the, we didn't become educators to do this, but it's nonetheless part of the job. And that is making them do the steps properly, right? Making kids do things they don't necessarily want to do is part of the job. Like it or not, it's part of being a teacher. And so enforcing, being a stickler or being firm about proper implementation of the step is part of classroom management. The other part is incentive programs. And I am not somebody who wants an elaborate incentive program. I want a simple, straightforward, takes me 5 minutes to set up incentive program. And there's a couple really easy ones to do. The best one, in my view, is keeping track of the number of stories each kid passes each week. It's really easy. It's a really easy thing to keep track of. And it goes a long way, because if students are focusing on how many stories they pass each week, they know they need to stay on task in order to meet those goals. And staying on task means more time in the act of reading. Okay. You can have individual goals for passing stories and then also have group goals, because that will get some peer pressure involved. Get the students telling each other to stay on task. Your student who passes the most stories in June is going to be the student who made the most progress by June, because that student read the most. Okay, so that's an incredibly powerful thing to tie a very simple incentive to. Another thing to think about is supplementary instruction. Common example might be you have a student who makes a lot of errors. Maybe that student has a phonics issue. Maybe they struggle decoding multisyllabic words. A program in Read Live that helps with that is our Word Warm-Ups Live program. Get students an opportunity to fix whatever phonics holes they have. Maybe the student needs a more robust vocabulary lesson. And so you have them click on all the blue words in the story to get that vocabulary lesson. All right, so those are some things that you might do to provide supplementary instruction. And then finally, just an adjustment to a level or goal can really re-engage a student. So consider making that kind of what might seem like a fairly minor adjustment, but you'd be surprised, especially for some students, how far that can go for them. All right, our final activity for today is taking a look at 3 separate students and seeing what we would do based on their data. Okay, this is our final little activity for the last few minutes of this presentation. We're going to look at Jeff, John, and Janelle. All right, we'll take a look at their data. We have Lee here at the top. And so now we're going to take a look at the next 3 students' data. Now, in your handout, you have a 1-page takeaway that provides you with all the information you need to analyze data. It tells you where our placement ranges are. It provides you with the oral fluency norms. It lets you know information about goal setting and where our series and levels are available. So just know that that's in your handout, and it can be a helpful tool when you're taking a look at your students at a glance reports. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with Jeff. We're going to see if we see progress in Jeff. I want you to notice with each of these three students that there's a little bit of information underneath at the very bottom of the page about this student. So notice for Jeff, we have, excuse me, Jeff has a note that says that he self-times for cold timing. So we can't rely on that cold timing data because he's doing it himself. But he's got an awesome attitude. He's positive. He works really hard. Okay. So the data report won't tell you that, but your teacher information tells you that. So Jeff is a third grader in 3.0. He's passed 12 stories. His cold timing score has remained the same, but he does it himself. So we're not exactly sure on that one anyway. The hot timing score has gone up a little bit. The difference between his hot timing score is only 7. We want it to be 10 or more, but it's only 7. His quiz has gone up to a significant amount. We were worried about him at first and 67%, but he's brought it up over 80%. His practices have been cut in half. Now, the number of practices impacts his hot timing score. Okay, think about this with me for a minute. At the first 3 stories, he practiced 6 times, and his average hot timing after those 6 practices was 93. He's only practicing 3 times now, and his average hot timing is 97. If he practiced twice as many times, I guarantee you that hot timing score would be a lot higher than 97. So sometimes you won't see much progress in the hot timing. In fact, you might even see a decrease in the hot timing. But the practices have gone down dramatically, and that impacts that score. Okay, so he's definitely in need of more of a challenge. He's got progress in hot timing and practices and quiz. All right, so we have to ask ourselves, what do we do? Do we raise his level? Do we raise his goal? And when we're asking ourselves that, we're looking at how many stories he's passed, what his long-term goal is, and is he closer to reading at grade level? Or is he closer to reading at the pace that peers in his grade are able to read at? Jeff has passed 12 stories. His long-term rate goal is 112. He's currently reading 61 words correct per minute. We want him at 112. That's almost doubling. It's a big improvement he needs there. So there's a long ways to go. He's a third grader in 3.0. So Jeff is much closer to level. He's fairly similar to Lee, right? He's being exposed to content that's really close to what his peers are being exposed to, but he is nowhere near as automatic with those words. And so because of that, I am going to work on Jeff's goal. I'm going to keep him in that level because I'm not worried about getting him harder vocabulary or harder concepts yet. He's about where his peers are that way. I'm worried about building him his automaticity. So I'm going to keep him with that level of difficulty in words, and I'm going to raise his goal to 100. Okay. But if Jeff was an 8th grader, would you do something different? The data is still the same. Okay. He's still made progress in the 3 areas. He's still passed 12 stories. His long-term benchmark goal is actually higher than it was, right? We want him at a 146. He's only at 61. So now he needs to more than double. But he's an 8th grader reading at 3.0. So which is he closer to? I don't know. I don't know which he's closer to. All I know is that they both are really far apart from each other, right? It's not clear which he's closer to because he's 5 years below grade level and he needs to more than double his pace. Would you do a different thing? In this case, I would raise Jeff's level because I need Jeff to have harder vocabulary words. I need him to work on more difficult tasks, more difficult concepts. He needs to be exposed to more challenging material. When you have a student who's reading that far below grade level, you don't have a choice. You have to be more aggressive with raising that level because you have such a long ways to go. Okay. So in this case, my recommendation would be to put him in level 3.5. Now, John is a student that I like to talk about because if you take a look at his note at the bottom here, it says he makes too many errors to pass on the first attempt. Every student or every teacher has a John, right? We all have one who does this. Sometimes we have more than one, unfortunately. Too many errors to pass on a first attempt is not something that we're going to accept. So John's a sixth grader in 5.0. His cold timing has gone up a tiny bit. I would say there's really not progress there, right? His hot timing has gone up a little bit. The difference between hot timing and his goal is only 144 to 140. His quiz has improved a little. His practices have remained the same. So from a real technical standpoint, he meets that two improvement areas, but does he need more of a challenge? I'm not giving a student more of a challenge if he's making too many errors to pass. Okay, you can't. He needs guidance. You need to tell him, I can't move you up because of these errors. You might want him to take a look at word warm-ups level 1 or level 3 and work on decoding multisyllabic words. You certainly want to make him read along out loud, make sure he's doing that step properly, make sure he's clicking on words he doesn't know, because we will not compromise accuracy, right? Now, if John had low quiz scores and was making too many attempts to pass or too many errors to pass, now you have to lower his level. Now, this is something I do not do without consideration, right? Important consideration, because nobody likes this. Nobody wants their goal lower. But I'll tell you what kids like less, and that is not passing on the first attempt. It's hearing the negative sound every time they answer a quiz question wrong, and it goes doot doot, tells them you're wrong. So if you're answering the quiz wrong very frequently and you have to go back and read along again and you have to pass again, that is really defeating. You put John in a slightly lower level, he's going to be more accurate, he's going to do better on the quiz, and he's going to start to buy in. And we know that that is what we need more than anything else, is the kids to buy in. Okay, so you will put him in 4.5. He will start to see success there. He will make progress there. Once you see that, you can put him back in 5.0 and he will pick up where he left off. All that data from 5.0 is still in there. So you don't lose anything if you drop him down for a short time. And you tell him, I'm going to bring you right back up. You show me you can make progress here and we'll get you right back into 5.0. Okay. He won't like it at first, but after that first story in that lower level, when he sees he does better, he's going to start to change his view on that. All right. Now, Janelle is a student who's already had her goal raised. She's showing signs of boredom. She's making tons of progress everywhere. Okay, so you take a look at these numbers. She's dramatically improved her cold timing, her hot timing. We've already raised her goal once, and she's again away 10 or more away from her goal. Her quiz is at 100% on average, and her practices have gone down. So there's no doubt Janelle needs more of a challenge. The question becomes, what do you do? Well, she's only passed 12 stories, and she's far away from her rate, and she's a little bit closer to her level. Okay, so she's technically closer to level. And in those situations, I tend to recommend raising a goal, right? But when a student has already had their goal raised, they're bored, and they're getting 100% on their quiz over and over and over again, that tells you something about content and level. So in Janelle's case, I would raise her level. When you see a student making significant gains in all the areas, you are at an advantage because they are flying high and have a lot of confidence. So you can make a more difficult increase. Raising a level is a harder increase than raising a goal. So when you see this kind of progress, feel free to be more aggressive with your increase and put Janelle in level 3.0 instead of just raising her goal. Now, as with most things in life, This is a nuanced process, which is why that data mentor is a tremendous help, but know it's just a suggestion. Your teacher instinct is valuable and important. And so lean on that if you're not sure, and also take a look at that data mentor suggestion. And then those two things combined will certainly help you make a great decision there. Also, call us. If you have questions, call us, email us. That's why we're here. Please reach out if you want to just talk about a specific student, need help running reports, or anything like that. We do have a brief survey after this presentation. There's a place in there for you to, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to put those in your survey and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we can make these sessions better for you. And mostly we appreciate everything you do for your kids, for your students. So thank you for being here today, and thank you for everything you do for your students. Have a wonderful afternoon.